Hey guys, here again for another movie review after reviewing quite a bit of stuff this past month. This time I ended up seeing the movie that is set to potentially bring back movie theaters, and in this case it's Godzilla vs. Kong. Now this is a movie that has gotten a lot of hype and attention, and honestly for good reason. King Kong and Godzilla are two of the most iconic movie monsters in existence, and even though I wouldn't consider myself a die-hard fan of either of these series, I have always been appreciative of their respective franchise. Though for quite some time, after witnessing a ton of Godzilla and Kong related stuff over the years, I've hoped for newer movies with these characters would come into life and would be remade as bigger, grander blockbusters with modern effects. Now don't get me wrong, I do love the original Godzilla vs. Kong for being a dumb, over-the-top monster battle movie for the time. Though, let's also be real, it is a movie that warrants a remake. It's rare for me to say this, but seeing these monsters fight in a bigger and more badass way was something I've always wanted to see. And thanks to the new Monsterverse bringing Godzilla and King Kong back into the limelight, and in my opinion, Legendary has done a pretty good job of representing these monsters in new films. So it seems like that wish of seeing a new movie with Godzilla and King Kong fighting was going to become a reality soon. So, was it worth it after all these years? Well, considering my expectations for something as simple as a giant ape and lizard fighting, I would say yes. Godzilla vs. Kong is the kind of movie you go in expecting and hoping for one thing, and fulfills that quota to a T. This is a movie you definitely go in to expect a ton of action and mayhem done relatively well, and you get the most for your buck here with this movie. It is a movie that's ridiculous. In fact, the plot itself is rather ludicrous in terms of how they get Kong and Godzilla to fight. This is a movie where you don't really care how they get to fighting. You just want to see them have some cool ass fight. And this movie has a lot of cool ass fights. The action is evenly spread out between the monster fights, but the fight sequences last for quite a while, and it's pretty much everything you would want to see in these fights. You can see the action really well, you see a ton of destruction and mayhem, and you see two titans duke it out in their own badass ways. And for the record, I actually saw this movie in theaters for the first time in over a year. Don't worry, I wear a mask and I'm also half vaccinated, but please be responsible and safe if you do decide to go to a theater again. Max up and get vaccinated. And this movie was a great experience to witness the most iconic kaijus of all time punching and biting one another on a huge IMAX screen. It really helped emphasize the scale of this movie. Granted, the option for HBO Max is still there if you're still not comfortable with theaters just yet, though in my opinion, it is a movie that's worth experiencing in a theater for how massive and grand something like this needs to be experienced on. If you are a die-hard fan of either of these characters, it's totally worth the trip to the theater for. But again, just as long as you're safe, vaccinated, and masked up. Oh, and if you're a die-hard fan of either of these monsters, you'll appreciate some of the neat Easter eggs and conclusion they have for both of these characters. I won't say who else shows up or who wins this battle, but as someone who saw this movie with friends who had more of a preference towards another monster, they were pretty satisfied with the results, and I don't think there's much to complain about with the execution of the results. Though I guess I gotta talk about the aspect of the movie that's already been a deal breaker and a consistent complaint with most of these monster movies are the human cast. In this one, they're fine. I mean, the human element in most of these films are never the best part, and many would argue it's what ruined these films. I don't think they ruined these films because if you look at past Godzilla movies, there's a lot of emphasis on the humans, and do you really think those moments are interesting either? Of course not. For me, it's more if they balance enough of the human stuff between the monsters. We do get long breaks between the monsters fighting and the humans being there, but when the fights happen, we rarely get any interruptions with the human BS, and we just witness these monsters fight, and it's pretty awesome to witness. Although, of course, it doesn't always mean that the human stuff are good. In this movie, they're nothing to write home about. However, there are some neat ideas here and there with the humans that they did in this movie. I kind of dig the idea of conspiracy podcasters being the one to uncover the mystery with Godzilla, and to their credit, Brian Tyree Henry does have a few funny moments. Plus, the whole Kong having a bond with a human through sign language is also done fairly well here. Even with that in mind, there their involvement is ultimately just there for a human element to latch onto, especially with how ridiculous the way they get involved into these situations are. Like I said, this is a movie where you don't really care how they fight, you just want to see them fight and have it look cool. And at the end of the day, Godzilla vs. Kong is what I expected, and I came out very satisfied with this movie. It doesn't overstay its welcome, nor does it feel like it doesn't give you enough. It gives you exactly what you want, and does it well in my view. If you're anyone who loves Godzilla, King Kong, or both, this is a must-see. I think you'll be satisfied with this movie, especially if you're someone like me who've wanted to see a movie like this come into full fruition for years now. If you're not into the MonsterVerse or these characters in general, you might not get a whole lot out of this new movie. Yet for fans, this is an absolute treat. It's an incredibly fun, action-packed movie that knows exactly what it is, and comes highly recommended for action movie lovers out there, especially for people who have been madly in love with Godzilla and King Kong for years now. So take that for what it's worth. I'm gonna give Godzilla vs. Kong an 8 out of 10. Good stuff. Check it out.
He's the leader of the bunch. You know him